When my sister laughed and told me I wasn't a guest on the $5,000 vacation I paid for, but the built-in babysitter, I didn't argue. I just smiled. I'd spent too many years trying to make her laugh with me instead of at me, and I finally realized the difference. So I smiled, let her words settle like salt on an open wound, and waited. I waited for the house to fall quiet, for the ocean wind to cool my face, for the soft click of opportunity that only comes when everyone else believes you're too weak to do anything about it. That night, I zipped my suitcase, walked to the door, and changed the code. Their vacation ended right where my self-respect began. If stories like this one pull you in, your like or comment truly helps keep them alive. I mean that from the heart. I share these stories because so many of us have lived them. We just didn't realize we were allowed to walk away. Your small gesture reminds me I'm not alone in telling the truth out loud. And my name is Charlotte. I'm 32, and for most of my life, I've been the good sister. You know the type, the one who remembers birthdays, brings casseroles, and picks up the phone on the first ring when someone else needs a favor. The one who believes that being helpful makes her loved. I worked hard, built a career in digital marketing, and saved for years to afford a proper break. Sun, sea, and silence. I thought, why not invite my sister Lydia, her husband Mark, and their 2 kids? They'd had a rough year, and I wanted to do something generous, something family. I pictured us laughing together, cooking seafood, watching sunsets while the kids built sandcastles. I saw it as healing, a gift that might finally bridge the distance between us. But generosity without boundaries isn't kindness. It's an invitation for someone to test how much you'll tolerate before you break. Lydia always had that gift. She could make selfishness sound like a shared opportunity. Growing up, she was the golden girl. Brighter, louder, always knowing what to say to get her way. I was the quieter one, the listener, the helper. When our parents divorced, I was the one who comforted Mom, while Lydia slipped away with Dad's credit card to clear her head. I never said anything back then. I thought silence kept the peace. I thought saying yes was love. Turns out, it was training. When I called Lydia months before the trip and said, I'm planning a beach vacation, my treat, her voice lit up like Christmas. She said, You're such a sweetheart, Charlotte. You always think of everyone else first. I should have heard the warning in that, because when someone praises your selflessness, they're usually just happy it benefits them. But I wanted the fairy tale. The sisters who finally got along, the kids who'd call me Aunt Char and run to hug me. I wanted to believe family could be easy just once. So I booked a gorgeous ocean view villa on the Gulf Coast, 4 bedrooms, private pool, breakfast terrace, the works. $5,000 didn't seem too bad when I imagined peace. I handled everything, flights, deposits, even car rentals. Lydia only had to show up. But even before we left, I felt that old imbalance creep in. Her texts were short, sometimes sarcastic. Don't forget, we'll need a car seat for both kids. Hope that's not extra. Or, you're sure the Wi-Fi is fast? Mark can't unplug completely. She said it half jokingly, but it wasn't a joke. It was a checklist of my responsibilities. And still, I brushed it off, because that's what I did. I brushed everything off until I was nothing but dust. The morning of the trip, Lydia and Mark arrived late to the airport, coffee in hand, kids half-dressed, and somehow it was my fault for booking such an early flight. She handed me one of the kids' backpacks without a word and said, You're better with the little ones anyway. I told myself she was just tired. I told myself family dynamics don't change overnight. I told myself a vacation is supposed to relax you, not trigger childhood flashbacks. But denial is a soft pillow you suffocate on slowly. When we arrived at the villa, the air smelled of salt and coconut oil, and for a brief moment, I let myself hope. I watched Lydia take photos for Instagram, the kind with captions about gratitude and family bonding, while I carried the luggage inside. The kids ran upstairs, claiming the biggest room, and Mark went straight to the fridge asking if I'd done the grocery order. Of course I had. The place looked like a catalog spread. White linens, turquoise sea beyond the balcony. Everything perfect. And for one short, shining hour, I believed maybe this time would be different. Then reality arrived, wearing Lydia's perfume and a smirk. While I unpacked snacks for the kids, she strolled in wearing her designer sunglasses and said, "Oh good, you're settling in. So, Mark and I are going to check out the spa this afternoon. You don't mind watching the kids, right? They just need a snack and maybe some pool time. You love that kind of stuff." Just like that, the tone was set. My vacation became her free childcare package. I should have said no. I should have laughed and said, "You booked your spa, not me." But my mouth said, "Sure," before my brain caught up. Years of habit. Say yes, stay useful, keep everyone comfortable. That's how I ended up sitting by the pool while they disappeared for 5 hours, posting selfies with cocktails. When they returned, sun-kissed and happy, Lydia handed me a half-empty smoothie and said, "You're the best, Char. We owe you." She didn't mean it. She never did. Later that night, when I finally slipped into bed exhausted, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles and thought, is this it? Is this what family love looks like? Me funding their fun while pretending I'm part of it? I remembered my mom once saying, "Sweetheart, some people only love you for the way you make them feel." I used to think she meant romantic relationships. Now I realized she meant family too. But I didn't cry, not that night. I just stared out the window, watching the moon paint silver lines across the ocean, and promised myself I'd draw one of my own. A line no one could cross again. The line between being good and being taken for granted. The tide whispered against the shore, and for the first time, I listened, really listened. They thought I was too soft to fight back. But softness doesn't mean weakness. It just means I've been patient longer than most people deserve. And patience, I was about to learn, has an expiration date. Lydia was always the kind of person who forgot things that didn't benefit her. She forgot birthdays, deadlines, parking tickets, but never forgot to mention when someone owed her a favor. Growing up, I used to cover for her, whisper excuses to teachers, stay up late helping her with homework she hadn't started, all because Mom said, "You know your sister's not as responsible as you, Charlotte. Be patient." Patience became my hobby. Lydia's forgetfulness became her freedom. Even as adults, that dynamic never changed. It just got more expensive. When she forgot to pay her phone bill, I covered it, just this once. When she forgot her wallet at dinner, I paid because it's faster that way. And when she forgot to save for this vacation, I told myself it was fine because I wanted everyone together. But the truth was simpler and sharper. Lydia didn't forget. She just expected me to remember. When we were kids, I used to envy her confidence. She could talk her way out of anything. Once she dented Dad's car and somehow convinced him it was my fault because I'd distracted her. I was 12. She was 16. She got grounded for a day and came home with a new pair of earrings to make up for it. Even then, she knew how to turn guilt into gifts. I thought adulthood would change that bills, jobs, and kids would teach her responsibility. Instead, she just found new people to blame. Her husband, Mark, was quiet, polite, always staring at his phone. I don't think he was a bad guy, just tired. Tired of pretending his wife's chaos was spontaneous charm. Tired of explaining her behavior to everyone around her. When he smiled, it was always thin, like a man trying to keep the peace in a war that would never end. The first morning of the trip, Lydia forgot to wake up in time for the breakfast reservation I'd made. The kids were hungry, Mark was pacing, and I ended up scrambling eggs in the villa kitchen while she snored upstairs. By the time she wandered down in her robe, the food was cold and I was sweating through my t-shirt. She glanced at the plates, yawned, and said, "You're such a lifesaver, Char. Seriously, what would we do without you?" She said it like a joke, but I heard the truth underneath. She wasn't joking. At first, I laughed it off. I told myself I didn't mind helping. That's what family does, right? But by the third day, helping turned into handling everything. I managed the grocery list, the car keys, the pool towels, and both kids' sunscreen because Lydia hates that sticky feeling. I even found myself fixing her hair before dinner because she couldn't get the beach waves right. It was like being trapped in a live-action remake of my childhood, only now there was Wi-Fi and wine involved. And it wasn't just the chores. It was the attitude, the casual way she dismissed every effort I made, the way she treated my kindness like an unlimited credit line. Once, when I mentioned maybe spending a day alone, she laughed and said, "Alone? Don't be silly, Char. You'd miss the kids too much." I wanted to tell her that missing peace and quiet was a luxury I'd been denied since the moment we landed, but instead I smiled. Again, because confrontation felt like a foreign language I'd never been fluent in. One afternoon, while Mark took a work call, Lydia decided we should all take the kids shopping. I ended up carrying bags full of overpriced souvenirs, while she complained about her pedicure chipping. Every time I tried to look at something for myself, she'd tug my arm and say, "We're on a budget, remember?" Her budget, not mine. The same one I'd been funding since day one. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so exhausting. At one point, she left her purse in a cafe, and when the waiter brought it back, she rolled her eyes and said, "I swear, I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached. Good thing I've got my little sister." She winked, and the waiter smiled, assuming we were just a pair of close siblings. I wanted to tell him that what he was seeing wasn't affection, it was habit. The habit of me cleaning up behind her, of her depending on my guilt to keep her life easy. That evening, when the kids were finally asleep, Mark sat outside with a beer, staring at the horizon. He looked peaceful, almost relieved to be alone for a moment. I joined him, and for a second, we just listened to the waves. Then he sighed and said quietly, "You know, you don't have to do all this, Charlotte. She takes advantage. She's always done that." His voice was low, careful, like he'd said it 1,000 times in his head, but never out loud. I didn't answer, because what was there to say? He was right. And yet he'd do nothing to stop it either. We were both hostages in Lydia's world, me bound by love, him by marriage. Later that night, I lay in bed thinking about how easily she got away with everything. She could vanish for hours, come back smiling, and everyone would thank her for showing up. Meanwhile, I could break my back keeping things together, and it would barely earn a glance. There's something deeply unfair about how the world rewards charm over consistency, how people forgive those who sparkle, even when they burn others in the process. And the cruel part? Lydia wasn't evil. She wasn't even mean in a deliberate way. She just lived with a blind spot the size of her ego. She didn't see the mess behind her because someone like me always swept it up. I used to think if I worked harder, she'd notice. That one day, she'd thank me, sincerely. But now, sitting in that villa, I started to see the truth. People who never say thank you don't forget. They just never think they should. The next morning, I woke up early and took a walk down the beach. The air was cool, the sand soft, and for the first time all week, no one was calling my name. I watched a family laughing near the pier, parents building a sandcastle together while the kids ran circles around them. It hit me that I was craving the same thing I'd been trying to buy. Real connection, not obligation, disguised as affection. I felt this quiet sadness, mixed with a growing spark of defiance. Maybe I couldn't change Lydia, but I could change how I responded to her. When I got back, the villa was chaos. Sunscreen spills, cereal on the floor, Lydia yelling about missing flip-flops. She looked at me like I'd abandoned my post and said, "Where were you? The kids were impossible." I almost apologized, but then stopped. For the first time, I said, "I was just out walking." No explanation, no guilt, no justification, just truth. She blinked, confused, then rolled her eyes and muttered something about attitude. But inside me, something shifted. A small, quiet rebellion had begun, one that didn't need noise to be powerful. I realized then that my sister's forgetfulness wasn't about memory at all. It was about priorities. She remembered what mattered to her, and she never thought I should matter as much as her comfort. That was the moment I started keeping track. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Every bill I paid, every hour I lost, every eye roll disguised as humor. I stored them all like receipts in the back of my mind. I didn't know it yet, but I was collecting evidence for my own freedom. Because when you grow up being the dependable one, revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with remembering who you really are and realizing you've been too patient for far too long. By the fourth day of the trip, it stopped feeling like a vacation and started feeling like employment. Only there wasn't a paycheck, just the unspoken rule that my worth was measured by how useful I could be. Every morning began the same way, Lydia yawning dramatically, mumbling something about needing just 10 more minutes, while I poured cereal, tied shoelaces, and wiped up orange juice spills before they turned the white counter sticky. Her kids were sweet, honestly, loud but funny, with those bottomless questions only kids can ask. But they weren't my responsibility. Still, Lydia had a way of turning every favor into a duty and every silence into consent. The injustice wasn't loud, it was subtle, cumulative, and so normal that it almost blended into the rhythm of the day. That's what made it dangerous, the way it crept in disguised as family togetherness. At breakfast, she'd sigh and say, "Char, could you just watch them for a bit while Mark and I take a walk? We need couple time." Then she'd disappear for hours. I'd entertain the kids, pack snacks, apply sunscreen twice, and watch the sun cross the sky while she posted photos captioned, "Quality time with my favorite person." I'd look at those pictures later, both of them smiling, glowing, and think how invisible generosity looks when no one's around to witness it. I started noticing small things that chipped at my patience. The way Lydia always ordered the most expensive items when we went out, then pushed the check toward me with a casual, "You've got this, right?" The way she'd forget her credit card, but never forget to add extra wine to the tab. The way she told the kids that Aunt Char's paying, she's so lucky she can afford nice things. Luck. That word hit like sand in my teeth. I wasn't lucky. I worked 2 jobs after college, saved every bonus, skipped vacations for years. My hard work had been repackaged as privilege, and somehow, that made me her wallet. By midweek, my exhaustion had turned physical. My shoulders ached from carrying bags, my skin burned from too many hours in the sun, and my patience wore thinner than the cheap beach towel Lydia brought instead of buying her own. She had promised to take the kids one afternoon so I could treat myself, but just before leaving, she announced her allergies were acting up and handed them back. "You don't mind, right?" she said, already walking away. I wanted to shout that I did mind, that I wasn't their built-in babysitter, that I was supposed to be on vacation too. But the words stuck. Saying no felt foreign, like breaking a rule I didn't remember agreeing to. Mark wasn't much help either. He'd retreat behind work calls whenever tension rose, quietly grateful someone else absorbed the chaos. I don't think he was malicious, just disengaged. I caught him watching Lydia sometimes with this weary resignation, as if he'd made peace with her selfishness long ago. But I hadn't. I was still in that space where you keep hoping someone will finally appreciate you if you're kind enough, patient enough, generous enough. The kind of hope that drains your spirit one small, polite act at a time. One evening, Lydia decided we should all go out for a special dinner to celebrate family bonding. Translation, another meal I'd pay for. I picked a seaside restaurant with string lights and live music, thinking maybe, just maybe, it would be pleasant. I wore a dress I hadn't taken out in years, the color of coral and optimism. For a brief moment, I felt like a guest instead of the help. But that feeling evaporated as soon as the check arrived. Lydia leaned back, smiled sweetly, and said, "You've got this, don't you, Char? You're the one who wanted this fancy place." Her voice was syrupy, her eyes already elsewhere. I looked at the bill, 2 lobster tails, 3 cocktails, a kid's dessert platter that could have fed a small village. $500. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as dust. I paid. Because that's what I did. But when we left, I walked a few steps behind, watching her laugh under the fairy lights, and something in me hardened. I didn't hate her, not yet, but I started to see her clearly. And seeing clearly is the beginning of every ending. Back at the villa, the kids were overtired, sugar-drunk, sticky-fingered. Lydia handed me a wet towel and said, "Would you mind giving them a quick rinse before bed?" I can't deal with sand right now. Then she poured herself a glass of wine and walked to the balcony to scroll through her phone. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled for the kids, helped them wash up and tucked them in. When they finally fell asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen. My eyes looked older than 32, not tired, defeated. I thought about calling Mom, but I knew what she'd say. "Charlotte, honey, you know how Lydia is. Don't let her ruin your trip." But wasn't that the point? Lydia was the trip. Every plan revolved around her comfort, every minute bent toward her convenience. I was the orbit to her sun. And for years, I'd mistaken gravity for love. Later that night, while they were all asleep, I went out to the balcony. The ocean was calm, black, and endless. I could hear the faint laughter from nearby villas, families talking, couples clinking glasses, the sound of people truly relaxing. And I stood there, barefoot, holding my phone, staring at the booking confirmation email. My name, my card, my rules. I noticed something small, but powerful, a Manage Access button under the smart lock details. I didn't understand exactly how it worked yet, but something about it felt like possibility. That was the first spark, a quiet flicker of awareness that I wasn't powerless. The villa, the booking, the money, all of it belonged to me. They could belittle me, drain me, mock me, but the foundation beneath their comfort was mine. And once that truth settled in, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The next morning, Lydia acted like nothing was wrong. She breezed through breakfast, talking about booking a snorkeling trip for the adults and leaving the kids with Aunt Char again. She said it with that breezy confidence of someone who assumes the world will always bend her way. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my sister. I saw a woman who used my kindness as currency. As she laughed about me time, I nodded and said, "Sure, I'll handle things." My tone was calm, almost kind, because anger is loud, but power is quiet. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but the decision had already taken root. I was done being the help, done being the reliable sister who covered, paid, and forgave. I just hadn't decided yet whether to leave gracefully or make sure she finally understood the cost of forgetting who paid for her happiness. Either way, a storm was coming, and this time I wasn't the one who'd be cleaning up after it. By the end of the week, my $5,000 vacation had turned into a full-time unpaid internship in chaos management. I wasn't just helping anymore. I was running operations. If something spilled, I cleaned it. If someone cried, I soothed them. If anyone forgot anything, and they always forgot something, I fixed it. My sister Lydia had turned relaxation into a pyramid scheme, and I was the foundation holding it all up. Every morning began with the same chorus. "Char, where's the sunscreen?" "Char, the kids need towels." "Char, did you book the snorkeling?" The kids' laughter mixed with her complaints, until I couldn't tell which sound tired me more. She'd make coffee for herself and Mark, post another filtered sunrise photo, and then slide her cup toward me with a little smile that meant refill it. I'd obey like muscle memory, because that's what happens when you spend your life being the reliable one. Your body moves before your boundaries do. It wasn't one big moment that broke me. It was 100 small ones. Like when she borrowed my sunglasses and forgot to give them back, then joked that I had too many nice things anyway. Or when Mark told me, with a laugh, that I was spoiling them by being so generous, as if generosity was my hobby, not their habit. Or when Lydia said, "You're lucky you don't have kids yet. You get all this free time," while I scraped mac and cheese off her toddler's plate. One afternoon, Lydia decided she and Mark deserved a couples kayaking day. She tossed me her phone with a list of emergency contacts just in case and said, "We'll be gone most of the afternoon. You're good with the kids, right?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity had gone beyond anger. "Right," I said, though every part of me wanted to scream no. That day, I spent 6 hours chasing sunscreen-slippery children who refused naps and wanted snacks every 10 minutes. The heat was relentless, the pool water sticky with chlorine, and my patience hung by a thread thinner than Lydia's excuses. When they finally collapsed into sleep, I sat by the pool, my skin burning, my hair heavy with salt, and realized I hadn't eaten since morning. I stared at the villa, this perfect, glossy cage I'd paid for, and thought, is this what being family means? Paying for your own imprisonment? When Lydia and Mark finally returned, sunburned and laughing, they barely glanced at me. She said, "Oh good, they're out." "You're such a lifesaver, Shar. We'd be lost without you." I wanted to tell her she already was lost, just too self-satisfied to notice. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and went to shower off the day. The water ran hot, and I stood there longer than I should have, letting the steam wash away every word I hadn't said. That night, we went out to dinner again. Lydia had found a must-try restaurant, the kind where even the bread comes with a story. She ordered 3 appetizers for the table, 2 bottles of wine, and something called ocean mist risotto. When the bill came, she slid it toward me so casually it was almost artful. Mark reached for his pocket, then stopped halfway, muttering something about his card being in the villa. Lydia laughed and said, "Don't worry, Char's got it. She always does." And I did. Again. After dinner, back at the villa, Lydia opened another bottle of wine and declared she wanted to play a game. Something fun, like old times. She pulled out a deck of cards and suggested we go around sharing what we were grateful for. Her kids joined in, giggling, naming toys and ice cream. Then she turned to me and said, "Char, what are you grateful for? Must be nice having such a flexible life, no husband, no kids, just freedom." The way she said it made freedom sound like failure. I wanted to tell her I was grateful for silence, the kind that didn't require apology. I wanted to tell her I was grateful for lessons that come disguised as humiliation. But I just said, "I'm grateful this trip is almost over." She laughed, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. The next morning, I tried to reclaim a little bit of peace. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat outside to watch the sunrise. The air smelled like salt and fresh beginnings. For 20 quiet minutes, I felt human again. Then Lydia came out, wrapped in a robe, hair messy in that effortless way she loved to brag about, and said, "You're up early." "Good. The kids will want pancakes. There's mix in the pantry," just like that. Peace evaporated, replaced by orders. I looked at her, the golden light hitting her face, and realized something profound. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She didn't have to. People like Lydia don't need malice to drain you. They just need your permission. And I'd been signing off on her behavior my entire life. That day was the worst yet. She left for a massage, then a manicure, then a shopping trip for souvenirs, all while I babysat and cleaned. When she returned, she dropped a small paper bag on the counter and said, "Got you something." Inside was a keychain shaped like a starfish, cheap, plastic, with the words Gulf Coast 2025 printed on it. I stared at it, trying to decide if it was a joke. She smiled. "You love sentimental stuff, right?" That was the exact moment I realized how differently we valued things. I'd paid thousands for this trip, sacrificed my rest, my patience, my dignity, and she handed me a keychain worth maybe $2. It was symbolic in a way. She gave me what she thought my effort was worth. That night, when the kids were finally asleep and the house was quiet, I sat in the living room scrolling through the booking app. I looked at every line of the reservation, the charges, the insurance, the smart lock access. I saw my name everywhere. Primary guest, Charlotte Blake. Emergency contact, Charlotte Blake. Owner of record, Charlotte Blake. Then I saw the words, change access code. My pulse quickened, not from revenge yet, but from clarity. I'd been waiting for Lydia to respect me, to finally see me as more than her safety net, but some people never look down, not until the ground disappears beneath them. I didn't press the button that night, not yet. Instead, I bookmarked it, closed the app, and whispered to myself, "Not today." But soon, because true revenge isn't loud or rushed. It's patient. It waits for the perfect moment, the one where justice doesn't just balance the scales, it breaks them. And I could feel that moment approaching, like thunder in the distance. It happened on a Friday night, the kind of night that should have been perfect. Warm breeze, ocean humming beyond the terrace, kids asleep early, candles flickering on the patio table. For the first time all week, I thought maybe we could end the trip on a peaceful note. I'd cooked dinner, grilled fish, lemon butter, a salad that even Lydia admitted didn't taste healthy. She poured herself another glass of wine and started scrolling through her phone, humming along to the sound of the waves. Then, out of nowhere, she laughed. Not a soft laugh, not one that invites others to join. This was the sharp kind, the kind that cuts. She turned to me, eyes sparkling with that familiar mischief that always meant trouble, and said, "You know, Char, it's funny. You're not really a guest here, are you? You're more like the babysitter, the world's most expensive babysitter, actually. $5,000 a week." She laughed again, head back, careless and loud. Even Mark chuckled, though he tried to hide it behind his glass. That sound, that laugh, landed harder than any insult could. It wasn't just mockery, it was confirmation. Confirmation that everything I'd been trying not to believe about my sister was true. I wasn't her equal, her friend, or even her sibling in her eyes. I was a convenience, a resource, a service she didn't have to pay for. I felt something inside me still, not break, still, like the final click when a lock turns shut. There was no anger, no shouting, no dramatic tears, just clarity, the kind that burns slow and steady like a flame that knows exactly what it's about to consume. I smiled, not out of politeness, but out of realization, because in that instant I remembered every single thing tied to this trip, the booking confirmation under my name, the insurance plan connected to my credit card, the emails from the villa owner sent directly to me, the app on my phone with the change code button that waited like a quiet weapon. Lydia kept laughing, oblivious. She reached over, grabbed a piece of bread, and said, "Don't take it personally, Char. You know I'm just teasing. You're good with the kids. It's natural you'd help out. It's kind of your role, my role." The word hit harder than any slap, my role, as if my life existed only to make hers easier. I excused myself from the table, saying I was tired. She waved me off, still smiling, already refilling her glass. I walked to my room, shut the door softly, and leaned against it. For the first time all week, I wasn't exhausted. I was awake. Every nerve in my body felt sharp and alive, humming with purpose. In the mirror, my reflection looked different. My face calm, my eyes steady, the lines of fatigue replaced by focus. I thought of Mom, how she used to say, "Some lessons don't come cheap, honey, but the expensive ones stick." Well, this one had cost me $5,000, and I wasn't about to let it go unpaid. I sat down on the bed, opened the booking app, and looked again at the access menu. Primary guest, Charlotte Blake. Below it, 3 listed temporary guests, Lydia, Mark, both kids. A fourth option read, Manage Guest Access. I tapped it and saw the small line of text. You may remove guest codes or update access at any time. My thumb hovered there for a moment. Then I smiled. Not yet, I thought. Not tonight. No, tonight was for reflection, and clarity is sweetest when it marinates overnight. I wanted them comfortable, confident, completely unaware. Let them drink, laugh, and sleep deeply in the house they believed they owned for the week. Let them sink into that illusion. Tomorrow, they'd wake up to a new reality. But first, I had to savor the moment, the strange calm that comes when a woman finally stops begging to be respected and starts enforcing it. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need apologies that would only sound rehearsed. I just needed action. I walked to the balcony, barefoot, the night air cool against my skin. The moonlight touched the water in long silver strokes, like someone drawing a line across the sea. A line, that word again. I'd drawn lines before, but I'd let them wash away with guilt. Not this time. This time, the tide would turn in my favor. Behind me, I could hear Lydia's laughter again, muffled through the glass doors, high and careless. The sound no longer hurt. It told me everything I needed to know. She'd never change. She'd always find someone else to carry the load, someone else to flatter and drain. But she'd never find me in that role again. When I finally went to bed, I slept better than I had in years. Deep, dreamless, peaceful sleep. The kind that comes when you've already decided what you're going to do, and you know it's right. The next morning would be the beginning of something entirely new, not revenge for the sake of anger, but justice served in silence. The kind of justice that doesn't need an audience, just timing. And my timing, at long last, was perfect. The next morning dawned clear and deceptively innocent. The air smelled of salt and coffee, that mix of promise and routine that always feels like renewal. I stood on the terrace with my cup, watching the horizon glow pink, and thought how strange it was that peace could look identical to surrender, until you decided otherwise. Behind me, the villa still slept, Lydia sprawled across the biggest bed, kids tangled in blankets, Mark snoring softly. For the first time all week, no one needed me. The silence itself felt like permission. I opened the booking app again. The familiar logo blinked, the page loaded, and there it was. My name, my credit card, my control. A single line of text that had seemed meaningless days ago now shimmered like revelation. Primary guest may manage property access. Beneath it, a small blue link. Remove guest codes. I scrolled further and found options I hadn't noticed before. Security notifications, billing receipts, damage waivers, even emergency contact preferences. Everything ran through me. I was the system's heartbeat. Without me, nothing in this house worked. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting that knowledge settle. The balance had shifted quietly in the night. Lydia thought she owned the rhythm of this vacation, but the architecture was mine. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt methodical. Revenge wasn't rage. It was design. When the kids woke up, I helped them find cereal, while Lydia wandered in, complaining about her wine headache. She asked if I could take them to the beach because she needed recovery time. I said, "Of course," and smiled so gently it confused her. That smile was my disguise now, soft enough to pass for kindness, steady enough to hide calculation. On the sand, I let the children run ahead, their laughter folding into the sound of the tide. I dug my toes into the wet line where waves met shore and thought about boundaries. Real ones, not the kind I'd drawn in words only to erase with guilt. I imagined drawing a line right there in the sand, watching the water wash over it, then drawing it again, deeper this time. That was what this week had been. Each insult a wave, each moment of clarity, a deeper groove. At lunch, Lydia texted asking if I could pick something up on my way back because she didn't want to waste daylight cooking. I replied, "Sure thing." She sent a thumbs-up emoji, her digital signature of entitlement. I laughed quietly. Even her gratitude was automated. Back at the villa, I paid the delivery man, tidied the patio, and slipped away to my room under the pretense of needing a shower. Instead, I opened my laptop. If Lydia could spend a week treating me like hired help, I could spend an hour treating myself like the owner I actually was. I changed the password on the booking account, forwarded every receipt to my personal email, and double-checked the clause about unauthorized guests. It was all crystal clear. The property was mine for the duration, and any additional guests were permitted solely at my discretion. I reread that line 3 times, at my discretion. Those words tasted like freedom. Then, for the first time since the trip began, I allowed myself a moment of humor. I pictured Lydia tomorrow morning, standing barefoot on the porch, tapping her phone against the door lock like it owed her something. I imagined Mark behind her, confused, the kids asking why the door wouldn't open. The thought didn't make me cruelly happy. It just made me peaceful, because I finally understood something simple. People who refuse to respect your limits will never stop crossing them. You have to move the fence yourself. That night over dinner, Lydia talked nonstop about next year's trip. Next year. As if this one hadn't already drained me to the bone. She listed destinations, Mexico, maybe Hawaii, and I nodded absently, saying, "Let's see how this one ends first." She laughed, thinking I meant the weather. After dinner, I helped the kids into pajamas, then packed my own suitcase quietly. I didn't rush. Every folded shirt, every zipped pocket felt ceremonial, like reclaiming pieces of myself I'd loaned out. I placed my wallet and phone on top, checked the charger, and set the bag beside the door. Outside, the villa lights glowed soft and golden, reflected in the pool's still water. Lydia and Mark sat by the edge drinking wine, oblivious, replaying their daily highlight reel. I joined them briefly, smiled, and listened to their small talk about how perfectly this trip worked out. My heart didn't race. I wasn't angry anymore. I was beyond anger, somewhere cooler, cleaner. When the kids finally drifted off and the house fell silent, I stood in the hallway for a moment, barefoot on the tile, the air conditioner humming like a secret. I opened the app one last time. My fingers didn't tremble. I removed the guest codes, entered a new one only I knew, and pressed save. The confirmation blinked green. Just like that, the balance of power shifted. No arguments, no shouting, just a line of code. I slipped out with my suitcase, pulling the door softly closed behind me. The night air was warm, the street quiet, except for the steady rhythm of waves somewhere beyond the palms. I walked 3 blocks to a small boutique hotel I'd found earlier. Clean sheets, kind staff, peace. When the clerk handed me my keycard, I felt lighter than I had in years. Lying in that new bed, I stared at the ceiling fan and smiled. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. For the first time, my choices served me. Tomorrow morning, they would wake to locked doors, unanswered calls, and a reality where the woman they'd underestimated finally decided to stop showing up. And maybe, if they listened closely, they'd hear the ocean whispering the same thing it whispered to me. Boundaries are just love with a backbone. The morning came bright and soundless, the kind of morning that hides its power behind calm. I woke in the little boutique hotel to the smell of fresh linen and quiet. No shouting, no sticky cereal, no Lydia calling my name. I sat up, stretched, and realized the tension in my shoulders had disappeared overnight. Freedom doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it slips in through the absence of noise. I made myself a slow breakfast in the hotel cafe and watched the sun push its way over the palms. The first sip of coffee felt like reclaiming ownership of my own body. I took out my phone and opened the booking app again. The lock control screen showed one active code, mine. Beneath it, 3 inactive ones labeled guest access revoked. No alarms, no drama, just digital finality. I took a screenshot and saved it, not to gloat, but to keep a record. The practical side of me wanted everything documented, in case Lydia's temper turned theatrical later. After breakfast, I opened my laptop, logged into the villa's customer service portal, and uploaded a brief message. Primary guest confirms removal of unauthorized guests due to repeated policy violations. It was formal, factual, emotionless, exactly how boundaries should look on paper. Then I forwarded all billing receipts and correspondence to my personal email. A tidy trail of evidence. The act wasn't vengeful, it was administrative closure. By mid-morning, my phone started buzzing. First a call, then another, then a string of messages. Shar, door won't open. Shar, the lock's broken. Shar, did you mess with something? I watched the screen light up, each notification like a small echo of my old life calling out. I didn't answer. Instead, I took another sip of coffee and enjoyed the faint hum of satisfaction that comes from not explaining yourself for once. An hour later, the tone changed. Lydia's texts grew sharper. This isn't funny. We have kids here. Open the door. Then Mark chimed in, trying for diplomacy. There's a misunderstanding. Let's talk. I could picture them standing outside the villa in their matching beach outfits, sunglasses on, confusion blooming into panic. The image wasn't cruelly satisfying, it was simply accurate. For years I'd cleaned up every mess they made. It was time they learned to face one on their own. Still, I wasn't careless. I replied through the villa's official message thread, where every word would be logged. Booking reserved, under my name. Guest access temporarily removed due to noncompliance with rental terms. All communications to go through property management, polite, crisp, undeniable. I sent it and closed the app. That was the moment I realized how different power feels when it's quiet. steady, not loud, earned, not stolen. Around noon, I got an email from the property liaison confirming they'd reached out to the additional guests to clarify that only the primary booking holder could authorize access. The tone was calm, but firm. They asked if I wanted to extend my stay since circumstances had changed. I smiled at that phrase. Circumstances had changed indeed. I booked 2 extra nights, just for the luxury of peace. In the afternoon I took a long walk by the beach. The sand was hot underfoot, and the wind played with the hem of my sundress. I felt my shoulders relax with every step. For the first time, the ocean didn't sound like escape. It sounded like applause. When I returned to the hotel, I found another string of texts from Lydia, her tone now shifting from anger to confusion to guilt. "Char, this is ridiculous. You're overreacting. We just wanted some fun. The kids are upset." That last message almost tugged at me, but not enough. I knew the pattern. When all else failed, she reached for sympathy. I typed one simple reply. "Actions have consequences, Lydia. You can book your own stay or go home. Either way, I hope you learn something." Then I muted the thread. That evening, I opened a bottle of chilled white wine, poured a glass, and sat by my window watching the villa from a distance. I could just make out the outline of my old life across the beach, the same structure, same view, but now it belonged to me alone. There was an odd poetry in that. The same walls, different meaning. I thought back to all the years I'd spent trying to be the good one, the responsible one, the fixer. I'd believed goodness meant endurance, but endurance without boundaries isn't virtue, it's self-erasure. The realization wasn't bitter, it was freeing. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. A new message from the property liaison read, "Guest codes permanently deactivated unless reauthorized. Thank you for your clarity. That word glowed like a medal. I closed my eyes that night feeling steady, not triumphant. Revenge had transformed into reclamation. This wasn't about punishing Lydia anymore. It was about teaching myself that I could draw a line and keep it drawn. Tomorrow, she'd either find a new place or drive home. Either way, she'd have plenty of time to reflect on what happens when the person you underestimate stops playing their part. And I, finally, had plans of my own. They say every storm sounds different when you're not the one drowning in it. That morning, the first notes of chaos came in the form of a furious pounding on my phone. Message after message, voicemail after voicemail, all variations of the same desperate rhythm. Lydia's voice, once syrupy and commanding, now cracked around the edges. "Charlotte, the door won't open. I don't understand what's going on. The kids are scared." A minute later, "You changed something, didn't you? This isn't funny. Let us in." Then, finally, Mark's calm but strained voice. "Hey, Char, we need to talk. The lock code isn't working. The property manager says they can't do anything without your approval. Can you please call me?" I listened to that last message twice, sipping my coffee. The irony was almost cinematic. The same people who spent a week treating me like an invisible maid now couldn't step inside the house without my say-so. Not because I shouted or fought, but because I finally stopped enabling. There's a special kind of justice in silence. It echoes longer than yelling ever could. I set my cup down, opened the curtains, and watched the morning light spill across the beach. The villa stood just down the shoreline, glinting white and hollow against the blue sky. From where I sat, it looked peaceful, but I imagined the scene up close. Lydia pacing on the porch in her designer flip-flops, hair frizzing in the humidity, Mark checking his phone for answers that didn't exist, the kids asking if Aunt Char was mad at them. No, I wasn't mad. Not anymore. Anger is noisy, and I was past that. What I felt now was cleaner, quieter, like fresh air after a thunderstorm. Around mid-morning, I sent one short message through the app's official thread, so everything would remain documented. This property was booked and paid for by me. Guests were informed of access terms and repeatedly violated them. Guest entry is suspended until further notice. Within minutes, the property manager replied, "Understood. Please advise if we should arrange alternative lodging for unauthorized guests." I typed back, Yes, please assist them with nearby hotels. The cost is their responsibility. There it was, the final piece. No shouting match, no moral lecture, just a transaction. Boundaries written in perfect, polite corporate English. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Lydia's messages had turned frantic. You can't just kick your family out like this. What about the kids? They're crying. Mom would be disgusted with you. That last one stung for half a second, but then I remembered how many times Mom had told me, you teach people how to treat you. Maybe this was the first time I'd really learned the lesson. I didn't answer Lydia directly. Instead, I forwarded the entire message thread, every word, to the villa's support team. The property liaison responded with a crisp, "Thank you for your transparency." That one sentence carried more validation than a decade of Lydia's hollow apologies ever had. By noon, they were gone. I saw them from a distance as a golf cart carried their luggage toward the resort gate. Lydia's posture was stiff, Mark's expression blank, the kids quiet and confused. She didn't look back at the villa, but she didn't have to. The entire beach had seen her meltdown that morning, and that was punishment enough. I didn't feel triumphant watching them leave. I felt balanced. For years, Lydia's chaos had been a performance that always ended with me cleaning the stage. This time, she was the one standing under the spotlight, exposed by her own entitlement. The beauty of it was that I hadn't needed to humiliate her. She did that all on her own. That evening, I walked back to the villa alone. The lock blinked green when I entered, and the air inside was cool and still. For the first time, the place actually felt like mine. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the balcony, and watched the ocean turn gold under the sunset. As the tide pulled back, I thought about how this trip had started, me trying to buy harmony, to force affection through generosity. I realized how backward that was. You can't purchase respect from people who see you as a resource. You can't heal relationships with people who think kindness is weakness. For years, I'd believed that family meant forgiveness without limit. But limits aren't cruelty, they're clarity. And clarity, I was learning, is its own form of peace. When the sky went dark, I sent one last email to the property manager confirming my extended stay. 2 more nights, just for me. I turned off my phone, stretched out on the lounge chair, and let the wind move through my hair. For once, there were no interruptions, no orders, no guilt, just the ocean, the stars, and the soft sound of balance restoring itself. And somewhere out there, I hoped Lydia was lying in her overpriced motel room, finally realizing that the sister she'd laughed at, the one she'd used, mocked, and dismissed, had quietly rewritten the script. The next morning, I woke to silence again, but not the peaceful kind this time, the expectant kind. The pause before someone knocks on the door you no longer owe them access to. Sure enough, by 8 a.m., my phone began to hum on the nightstand. One call, then another, then a flood of messages. Lydia was back to performing her favorite role, the misunderstood victim. I didn't answer the first few. I brushed my teeth, took a shower, brewed coffee, and enjoyed every unhurried minute of it. My peace was my armor now. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened her first voicemail. "Char, we need to talk. This has gone too far. You embarrassed us. You made us look ridiculous. The kids were crying. We had to book another place last minute. Do you even care about anyone but yourself?" Then another. "I checked with the property manager. They said it's your booking. That's so petty, Shah. You could have just said you were upset instead of humiliating us like this." And the best one. "You know, after everything I've done for you over the years, this is how you treat me." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. After everything she's done for me. The only thing Lydia had ever done was remind me how heavy love feels when it's one-sided. I waited until I'd finished breakfast before replying. Calmly, professionally, I drafted a message in the villa's app, the same channel that logged all communication. I attached the receipts, every invoice, every confirmation email, every payment record, my card, my name, my signature, the facts neatly lined up like soldiers ready for inspection. Then I wrote, "Hi Lydia, The villa booking, travel insurance, and all associated costs were made under my name and credit card. I invited you as a guest. Over the course of the trip, I was repeatedly assigned unpaid childcare, household duties, and full financial responsibility for shared activities. When I attempted to establish boundaries, I was met with mockery and disrespect. The property's policy grants me full authority over access and guest management. Your behavior voided that privilege. I've asked the villa to coordinate your alternate accommodation. This matter is closed. I read it twice before sending. No venom, no dramatics, just clarity. The kind of tone that leaves no handholds for manipulation. Minutes later, her response popped up. It was a masterpiece of self-pity. Char, you're overreacting. You always take things too personally. We were joking. You've ruined a family memory over nothing. I typed back. It wasn't nothing. It was years of me pretending your disrespect was humor. I'm done pretending. Then I muted her again. Mark reached out next. His message was short, almost sheepish. I'm sorry, Charlotte. She shouldn't have said what she said. I didn't stop her, and that's on me. I get why you're upset, but the kids miss you. They keep asking if you'll come by. That one tugged at something softer inside me. I like those kids. They didn't choose any of this. But I also knew that soft spots are exactly where Lydia always pressed hardest. So I took a breath and replied with kindness edged in steel. Tell them Aunt Char loves them. But Aunt Char's taking a break from being the family fix-it person. Everyone needs to learn what boundaries look like, even adults. No guilt, no apology, just truth. Later that afternoon, I got an email from the property liaison. It said the family had attempted to dispute the charge, claiming I'd locked them out without warning. I smiled when I saw the response already drafted by the management team. Primary guest provided documentation of full payment and detailed communication logs, confirming guest violations. Case closed in favor of primary guest receipts, literal and emotional, never lie. That evening, as the sky turned violet over the water, I sat on the villa's balcony and thought about how many years I'd let Lydia's voice define reality for me. How many times she'd called me sensitive, dramatic, uptight, all just because I wanted fairness. And yet, here I was, calm, sun-kissed, and utterly still. Sensitivity doesn't mean weakness. It means you feel when something's wrong before everyone else does. I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted to my own backbone, the one I'd hidden behind patience for too long. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. My phone buzzed one last time that night. A single text from Lydia. You'll regret this when Mom finds out how you treated family. I wrote back. If Mom were here, she'd tell me it's about time. Then I turned my phone face down, exhaled, and watched the stars settle above the dark ocean. For once, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval, apology, or validation. I already had what I'd been chasing my whole life. Self-respect, wrapped in silence. Tomorrow I'd pack my things, check out, and leave behind not just a villa, but a lifetime of imbalance. And as for Lydia, she'd have her version of the story. She always did, but this time, her version wouldn't matter, because the truth had receipts. 2 days later, the story broke out of our little family bubble and spilled into the wider world, the way truth always does when someone spent too long curating lies. It started small. A Facebook post from Lydia that read, "Imagine being betrayed by your own sister on vacation." A photo of her kids sitting outside the villa gates, pouting in swimsuits, captioned with a tragic emoji. The comments came fast, full of sympathy and outrage. Some people are just heartless. Family over money. Poor babies, I almost laughed. She really thought she could win the court of public opinion. But Lydia forgot one key fact. She'd built her audience on half-truths, while I had the receipts. I didn't post a word. I didn't need to. The property liaison had already filed their official report, a clean, unemotional document confirming that the villa was booked solely in my name, that guest access was revoked due to violation of terms, and that alternate lodging was provided at guest expense following non-compliant conduct. Corporate language never sounded so delicious. That report didn't stay private for long. A friend of Mark's, the kind of guy who lives for drama and happens to manage vacation rentals himself, commented on Lydia's post. Hold up, your sister was the primary guest? Then she had every right. Those villas have strict security. You can't just freeload. Within hours, Lydia's sob story started to unravel in real time. People she thought were allies began asking uncomfortable questions. Didn't she pay for the whole trip? Wait, why were you locked out if you followed the rules? Someone even shared screenshots from the villa's official statement that had been sent to her email, receipts attached. Watching her narrative collapse wasn't joyful exactly. It was satisfying, like watching a wound finally close after years of infection. You don't cheer, you just breathe easier. Mark, predictably, stayed silent online. He always preferred avoidance to confrontation. But his mother, God bless her blunt Midwestern honesty, left a comment under Lydia's post that simply read, "Charlotte paid for everything, Lydia. Sit this one out." That one comment got over 50 likes. By evening, Lydia deleted the post. Then, like clockwork, the apology texts started coming in. The tone had changed again. Soft, careful, pleading. "Char, can we talk privately? This got out of hand. People are taking it the wrong way. You made your point, okay? Can we just move past it?" Move past it. As if what she'd done was a traffic ticket, not a lifetime of entitlement condensed into a single, unforgettable week. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the entire message thread to myself again. A habit now. A kind of emotional record-keeping. For once, I didn't feel tempted to explain or defend. I simply let the silence do what words never could. The villa staff checked in that afternoon. The manager, a woman named Grace, called to confirm my checkout time. Her voice was warm, respectful. "Ms. Blake," she said, "I just wanted to tell you, I've worked here 8 years, and I've seen all kinds of family drama, but the way you handled yours, with documentation and dignity, that's rare. Most people either explode or cave. You just closed the door quietly." I smiled. "That's the only kind of closure that lasts," I said. That night, I treated myself to dinner alone at the same seaside restaurant where Lydia had once laughed at the bill. The waiter recognized me and said, "Weren't you here with a big group earlier this week?" I nodded. "Not anymore," I replied. He grinned. "Looks quieter this way." He wasn't wrong. I ordered exactly what I wanted. No compromises, no splitting checks, no guilt. Just food that tasted like freedom, and wine that hummed like self-respect. Halfway through the meal, a notification popped up, a private message from a mutual friend. It said, "Hey, I don't know the full story, but good for you. People forget kindness isn't endless." I sat back and let that sentence sink in. Kindness isn't endless. It's not a fountain. It's a well. And when people keep taking without giving, it runs dry. I'd spent most of my life refilling Lydia's bucket, while my own ran empty. Now finally, I'd close the tap. When I returned to the villa for my final night, the sunset was the same as ever, pink fading into gold, but it felt like the universe was wiping a slate clean. No bitterness, no leftover anger, just stillness. I walked through each room, collected my things, and double-checked the windows. It wasn't about property, it was about closure. I left the place tidier than I'd found it, not for Lydia, but for myself. Before locking up, I placed the plastic starfish keychain, the one Lydia had gifted me, on the kitchen counter, a silent little trophy of how little she'd valued me, and how much that ignorance had cost her. Then I took one last look around and smiled. By morning, I'd be gone. Lydia could keep her stories, her filters, her fragile pride. I'd keep my peace and my power. Somewhere between the soft crash of waves and the quiet click of that lock, I realized I'd finally rewritten the ending of our family dynamic. The world might see it as a small vacation spat, but I knew better. It was the day I stopped being the supporting character in Lydia's life and became the author of my own. I thought I'd never hear from her again after the online fiasco, but people like Lydia don't vanish when they're embarrassed. They regroup. 2 weeks later, a message arrived. Polite, overly polite. Hey Shar, hope you're doing okay. The kids really miss you. Can we meet for coffee and clear the air? I stared at it for a long moment. The old version of me would have said yes immediately, desperate to smooth things over. But the woman reading that message now had learned the difference between peacemaking and people-pleasing. I waited a full day before replying. Sure, Lydia. 1 hour, neutral place, you pick. She chose a coastal cafe halfway between our towns. Neutral indeed. When I arrived, she was already there, hiding behind oversized sunglasses like she was in witness protection. She waved awkwardly, that same dramatic smile she always used when trying to charm her way out of consequences. Shar, she started before I'd even sat down, that whole thing, it just got out of control. You know how social media is. I shouldn't have posted. People twisted everything. I took a slow sip of my coffee before answering. You didn't need to post for people to see what happened, Lydia. You just finally couldn't control the story. Her shoulders stiffened. So what, now you're perfect? You never make mistakes? I smiled, calm, not smug. I make plenty, I just own them. For a moment she looked like she might argue, but then she sighed, a long theatrical sound, and said, Look, I'm not here to fight. The kids keep asking when they'll see you again. They miss their Aunt Shar. Can we please just move past all this drama? There it was again. Move past it. The magic phrase that had always reset every argument in Lydia's world, erasing consequences like chalk in the rain. But this time, I didn't flinch. Lydia, I said evenly, I'm not holding a grudge, but moving past something doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. I'm willing to have a relationship, on new terms. She frowned. Terms? You make it sound like a contract. In a way it is, I said. Boundaries are just contracts we write with people who forget how to behave. She leaned back, clearly uncomfortable. Okay, fine. What kind of terms are we talking about? I opened my purse and took out a small notepad. Her eyes widened. You actually wrote them down? I nodded. 3 rules, simple ones. I read them out loud. 1. We split costs on any shared plans, equally up front. 2. I don't babysit unless I volunteer. 3. If you mock, belittle, or guilt me, I'll leave. No discussion. Lydia stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You're serious. Dead serious, I said, meeting her eyes. And if that makes me cold, fine. I've been warm enough for both of us my whole life. She looked down, tracing circles on the table with her fingertip. You've changed, she murmured. I smiled softly. No, I just stopped shrinking. The silence between us stretched, uncomfortable, but clean. For once, I didn't rush to fill it. She finally sighed, that familiar blend of annoyance and reluctant respect. Fine, we'll do things your way. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest Lydia had ever come to one. And honestly, that was enough. Because I wasn't looking for repentance, I was looking for recognition. We finished our coffee mostly in silence. When I stood to leave, she said, The kids' birthdays are next month. I'll send you the info. Send it, I said, and remember the first rule. She almost laughed, but stopped herself. Okay, you win. I shook my head. It's not about winning, Lydia. It's about not losing myself anymore. As I walked out into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because she'd agreed, but because I finally understood something simple. I didn't need her validation to make peace. I just needed my own permission to stand firm. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, thinking about everything that had unfolded since that trip. The villa, the locks, the quiet revenge that became self-respect. For the first time, I realized that all those years I thought Lydia was the strong one, the loud one, the bold one. She was just the one most afraid to be alone. Strength doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention or applause. It just keeps showing up for itself, quietly, consistently, until no one else's chaos can shake it. As the sky faded from pink to gray, I wrote a short note in my journal. I can't control who they are, but I can control the doors I keep unlocked. Then I smiled, closed the notebook, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Ease. Not triumph, not revenge, just calm certainty that I'd finally stepped out of the shadow of her noise. 6 months later, I stood on another beach. Not the one from that disastrous trip, but one quieter, softer, the kind of place that doesn't scream for attention. I'd taken a solo weekend away, something I used to think only selfish people did. Funny how that word changes meaning once you stop apologizing for your own peace. The ocean was calm that morning, flat as glass, the kind of stillness that lets you hear your own thoughts without interruption. I rented a small cottage, paid for by me, for me. No extra guests, no hidden expectations. Just space, quiet, and the luxury of having no one to take care of but myself. My phone buzzed, a photo from Lydia, her and the kids at what looked like a roadside motel pool. The caption read, "Family weekend, nothing fancy, but it's ours." For the first time, the sight didn't sting. It didn't even amuse me. It just existed. Maybe she'd learned something after all. Maybe not. But that was no longer my business to track. I texted back, "Looks nice. Tell the kids I said hi." Simple, clean, kind. Boundaries didn't mean bitterness. They just meant balance. When I set the phone aside, I realized how different my body felt now. Lighter, easier, as if I'd been carrying a backpack full of invisible obligations my whole life and finally dropped it on the sand. I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means releasing the hope that things could have been different. I walked along the waterline, watching waves nip at my ankles, and thought about all the women who stay quiet for too long, daughters, sisters, mothers who confuse endurance for love. We keep giving, believing patience will be rewarded, not realizing that some people only respect the word no when it finally locks the door behind them. At one point, I passed a family building a sandcastle. The mother was laughing, her hands covered in wet sand, while her teenage daughter bossed everyone around with gentle authority. I smiled to myself. There was something beautiful about that, a family dynamic built on shared effort, not hierarchy. Back at my cottage, I made tea and sat by the open window. The breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine, and for a moment, everything was exactly where it should be. I thought about the version of me who'd arrived at that first villa, tired, eager to please, terrified of being seen as unkind. She'd thought kindness was currency. Now I knew it was a choice, and choices are only meaningful when you can also say no. Later that evening, I met the couple who ran the cottage, 2 older women, partners who'd built the place themselves after retiring from teaching. We talked for hours over homemade lemonade, swapping stories about families, lessons, and starting over. One of them, Nora, said something I'll never forget. "You can't control who hurts you, darling, but you can control who gets a second chance." That line stayed with me. It summed up everything I'd lived through, every exhaustion, every quiet revelation, every line I'd drawn in the sand. When I checked out the next day, the owners left a small seashell on my pillow with a handwritten note. "Boundaries are love wearing good shoes." I laughed out loud. It felt like the universe winking back at me, confirming what I'd come to believe, that boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. You decide who walks through and when. Driving home, the road unspooled before me like a ribbon of possibility. I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful, just grounded. Lydia would always be Lydia, charming, careless, slightly exhausting, but she no longer held the keys to my peace. The villa, the lock code, the laughter, the humiliation, all of it had been part of a larger education. How to stop buying love that was never for sale. That night, back in my own home, I lit a candle and poured a glass of wine. I scrolled through the photos from my new trip. Nothing glamorous, just sunsets, seashells, and my own content face. And I whispered, half to myself, half to the woman I'd finally become, "You did it. You stopped asking for respect and started expecting it." I smiled, closed my phone, and sat back in the quiet glow of a life that finally belonged to me. Because in the end, revenge isn't slamming the door. It's learning you never needed to knock.